The day I signed away my inheritance was the same day I decided to destroy my father, not with violence or scandal, but with the very weapons he'd taught me to wield: patience, precision, and the law. My name is Olive, and I'm a civil rights attorney, though my father never fails to remind me I could have aimed higher. The Bennett and Associates building loomed over me as I walked through its glass doors, my heels clicking against marble floors that had witnessed 2 decades of my father's ruthless dealings. "He's waiting for you," his secretary Monica whispered, sympathy clouding her eyes. She'd watched me grow up in these halls, had seen the gradual shift from daddy's little girl to whatever I was now. I straightened my blazer and entered his office. The place still smelled of leather and expensive cigars, just like it did when I was 12 and would sneak in to read law books while he was in meetings. "Olive." He didn't look up from his computer. "The papers are on the desk. Sign them." "Hello to you too, Dad." I picked up the stack of documents, each page a carefully crafted betrayal. "You know, most fathers would at least pretend to feel guilty about strong-arming their daughter out of her inheritance." He finally looked at me, his steel gray eyes unchanged by the decades. "Your brother needs this more than you do. You have your career. Desmond, he needs structure, guidance. You mean control." I flipped through the pages, already knowing every word by heart. I'd spent 3 nights analyzing them with Alina, my colleague and closest friend. "He's 32, Dad. When are you going to stop treating him like he's 16? When he stops acting like it." He stood up, walking to his wall of windows. "Poetry doesn't pay bills, Olive. Someone needs to protect his future." I bit back a laugh. If he only knew how many of Desmond's poems had been published under a pen name, how his wayward son had built a quiet but respectable literary reputation while pretending to be the family disappointment. "Sign the papers, Olive. Don't make this difficult." "Like you made it difficult when I got into law school?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. "When you told me civil rights law was beneath our family's standing?" He turned, his face hardening. "You're still bitter about that? I pushed you because I saw your potential. You could be running this firm by now. Instead, I'm just helping people who actually need it. What a waste." I grabbed the Mont Blanc pen, a graduation gift from him, and signed each page with deliberate strokes. Each signature felt like laying another brick in the foundation of what was to come. There, I slid the papers across his desk. "Happy now?" He picked them up, checking each signature. "It's for the best, Olive. You'll see that someday." "Oh, I'm sure I will." I stood up, smoothing my skirt. "By the way, how's the mayoral campaign planning going?" He paused, just for a fraction of a second. Most people wouldn't have noticed, but I'd spent my life studying his tells. "Who told you about that?" "I have my sources." I headed for the door, then turned back. "You know what's funny, Dad? You always said my biggest weakness was that I care too much about justice, but maybe that's not a weakness at all. Is that a threat?" His voice was quiet, dangerous. I smiled, the same smile he'd taught me to use in negotiations. "Of course not. Just an observation from your disappointment of a daughter." I opened the door. "Good luck with the campaign, Dad. I'm sure all sorts of interesting things will come to light during the vetting process." "Olive?" His voice stopped me. "Don't do anything foolish." "I learned from the best, Dad. Everything I do is carefully calculated." I closed the door behind me, nodding to Monica as I passed. My phone buzzed as I reached the elevator. A text from Desmond. "Did you do it?" "Yes," I typed back. "Phase 1 complete. You still in?" His response came quickly. "All the way, sis. He'll never see us coming." I smiled as I stepped into the elevator, remembering the night 2 months ago when I'd found Desmond in his apartment, surrounded by papers and empty whiskey glasses. He'd shown me everything: The offshore accounts, the falsified documents, the trail of corruption our father had built his empire on. We'd stayed up until dawn, plotting and planning, two siblings finally united in purpose. The elevator doors opened to the lobby, and I walked out into the sunshine. My father thought he'd won today, thought he'd put his rebellious daughter in her place while securing his golden boy's future. He had no idea that his carefully constructed world was about to unravel thread by thread, law by law. I pulled out my phone again, dialing Alina's number. "Hey," I said when she answered. "It's done. Time to move to phase 2. "You sure about this?" she asked. I looked back at the building bearing my family's name. More sure than I've ever been about anything. The game was on, and I intended to win. Desmond's apartment always smelled like coffee and old books. I found him on his balcony that evening, cigarette in one hand, notebook in the other. The city lights sparkled below us like fallen stars. "You're smoking again," I said, sliding the glass door closed behind me. "And you're judging again?" He stubbed out the cigarette anyway, giving me a crooked smile. "How'd the old man take it?" "Like a king accepting tribute." I sat in the weathered chair beside him. He didn't suspect a thing. Desmond laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Of course not. In his mind, you're still that little girl desperate for his approval, and I'm still the family screw-up." "Speaking of screw-ups," I nodded toward his notebook. "How's the new collection coming along?" He hesitated, then handed me the leather-bound book. "See for yourself, page 43. I flipped through pages filled with his precise handwriting until I found what he wanted me to see. The poem was titled Empire of Glass. "Read it out loud," he said quietly. I cleared my throat. "In Father's tower of mirrors and lies, where truth distorts like morning fog, I watched him build his kingdom high, on foundations made of fool's gold and borrowed time." My hands started shaking as I continued. "In hidden vaults and secret files, the evidence of empire's fall awaits its day of reckoning, when justice claims her due from all." Jesus, Des. I looked up at him. "You can't keep this here. If he ever found it—" "He won't." Desmond took the notebook back. "Besides, it's just poetry, right? That's what he always says. My useless hobby." A door slammed somewhere in the building, making us both jump. We'd grown up flinching at sudden noises, at footsteps in hallways. "Show me everything," I said, "all the documents you mentioned." He led me inside to his study, pulling a false bottom from his desk drawer. Took these from his office over the last year. Whenever he'd call me in for one of his career guidance sessions, I'd wait until he stepped out and photograph whatever I could find. The stack of papers he handed me was devastating. Fake invoices, doctored financial statements, evidence of bribes paid to city officials. My father's fingerprints were all over them, metaphorically, if not literally. This is why he's pushing for the inheritance transfer, I realized. He needs clean money for his campaign, money that can't be traced back to all this. Bingo. Desmond poured us both a whiskey. The prodigal son and the dutiful daughter, publicly supporting their father's bid for mayor with their legitimate inheritance. It's a perfect story. Too perfect. I took a sip, letting the alcohol burn away my hesitation. "We need more. These documents are a start, but we need someone on the inside." Desmond's eyes lit up. "What about Maria? She's been on the board forever, and she was Mom's best friend before." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. We both remembered the car accident that took our mother 12 years ago, and the way our father had seemed more inconvenienced than grieving. "Maria might help," I said slowly. "She never remarried after her husband died. Dad helped her keep her board seat when others wanted her out. She owes him." Exactly why she might want to settle that debt. Desmond grabbed his phone. "She always liked me. Let me set up a lunch with her. I watched him text, noting how his hands shook slightly. You okay with all this? It's not too late to back out. He looked up, and for a moment I saw the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. Remember what Mom used to say? The truth always rises like cream to the top. Yeah, I whispered. I remember. Well, I'm tired of watching Dad skim off that cream and leave nothing but sour milk behind. He showed me Maria's response. Lunch tomorrow, 1 p.m. usual place. We're doing this, Olive. For Mom. For us. My phone buzzed. A text from Alina. Meeting set with Wyatt for tomorrow morning. He's interested. Wyatt's in, I told Desmond. If we can get Maria too, we will. He walked me to the door. Hey, Olive. Thanks for not giving up on me, even when I was trying my best to be exactly what Dad said I was. I hugged him, breathing in the familiar scent of coffee and tobacco. You're my little brother. That doesn't change, no matter what. As I drove home that night, I thought about Desmond's poem. Our father had built his empire on glass and lies, thinking himself untouchable in his tower of mirrors. But he'd forgotten one crucial thing. Mirrors can be shattered, and when they break, they cut deep. I pulled into my driveway just as another text came through from Desmond. Found more files, big ones. Come by tomorrow after Maria? Will do, I replied. Sweet dreams, poet. His final message made me smile. Justice never sleeps, sis. Neither do we. The press conference room at Bennett and Associates buzzed with anticipation. I stood at the back, watching my father work the crowd like a master conductor. Every smile, every handshake was perfectly choreographed. My fellow citizens, he began, his voice carrying that practiced warmth he'd perfected over decades. Today, I'm announcing my candidacy for mayor of our great city. Cameras flashed. Reporters leaned forward. I caught Desmond's eye across the room. He was playing his part perfectly, the prodigal son in an expertly tailored suit. With the full support of my family, my father continued gesturing to us, I pledge to bring integrity, transparency, and progress to City Hall. I felt bile rise in my throat but maintained my camera-ready smile. Beside me, Alina squeezed my arm gently, a reminder to stay calm. Mr. Bennett, a reporter stood up. Your children's inheritance was recently restructured. Any connection to campaign financing? My father's smile didn't waver. My family's private financial decisions are exactly that, private, but I can assure you that everything has been handled with complete transparency and legality. I watched Maria shift uncomfortably in her seat. She'd agreed to meet Desmond for lunch, but seeing her reaction now, I wondered if we might have more leverage than we thought. The questions continued for another 20 minutes. I counted 3 times my father lied outright, and 6 times he dodged with carefully worded non-answers. When it was over, he beckoned Desmond and me to his office. Well done, both of you, he said, pouring himself a scotch. Desmond, that suit was the right choice. Olive, try to smile more next time. You looked severe. Wouldn't want to tarnish your image of perfection, I muttered. He set his glass down hard. Don't start. This campaign is crucial for all of us. The connections we'll make, the opportunities, the bribes we'll take. The words slipped out before I could stop them. His face darkened. Careful, Olive. Very careful. Desmond stepped between us. She's just tired, Dad. We all are. Maybe we should call it a day? Fine. Our father waved us away. But remember, from now on, everything you do reflects on this campaign. Everything. In the elevator, Desmond let out a shaky breath. That was close. Too close, I agreed. Did you see Maria? Yeah, she's nervous. Meeting her in an hour. I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Wyatt. Keep me posted. I need to see Wyatt. I found him in his office across town, surrounded by financial reports. My old mentor looked up as I entered, his face grave. "Close the door," he said. I did. "What did you find?" "It's worse than we thought." He spread out several documents. "Your father's been running a sophisticated scheme through the firm. Client money disappearing into shell companies, reappearing as clean political donations. Can we prove it?" "With Maria's help, yes. She's been signing off on these transactions for years, probably without realizing their full scope." My phone buzzed. A text from Desmond. "Maria talking. It's big. Get here now." "I have to go," I told Wyatt, "but send me everything you found." I met Desmond and Maria at a small cafe far from our usual haunts. Maria looked like she'd aged 10 years since the press conference. "Tell her," Desmond urged gently. Maria's hands shook as she lifted her coffee cup. "Your mother, the accident, it wasn't random." The world stopped spinning for a moment. "What?" "She'd found something," Maria continued. "Documents like the ones you have now. She was going to expose everything. Then the brake lines in her car." "No," I whispered. "He wouldn't. He didn't do it himself," Maria said quickly. "But he knew. He knew, and he let it happen. I've carried that knowledge for 12 years. Desmond grabbed my hand under the table. I could feel him trembling. "I'll help you," Maria said. "Whatever you need, it's time the truth came out." Back in my car, Desmond and I sat in silence for a long moment. "We can't let this go," he finally said. "No," I agreed, "but we have to be smart. He's already killed once to protect his secrets." "So, what's the play?" I started the car. "We gather everything, the financial records, Maria's testimony, Wyatt's evidence. Then we take it all to the ethics committee, the DA's office, and the press, simultaneously." "He'll see it coming." "No," I said, pulling into traffic. "He'll see what he expects to see. His ambitious daughter and poetic son playing their assigned roles. He thinks he wrote this story. He doesn't realize we're writing our own ending." My phone rang. Our father's number. "Don't answer it," Desmond said. I hit ignore, watching the notification fade away. "Time to go see Alina. We need to make sure every legal angle is covered." "Olive?" Desmond's voice was small. "Mom would be proud of us, right?" I thought of our mother's favorite saying about truth rising like cream. "Yeah, Des, she would be." The truth about our mother's death had changed everything. This wasn't just about inheritance anymore. This was about justice, long delayed but finally within reach. "You're telling me your father had your mother killed?" Alina paced her office, heels clicking against hardwood floors. "This changes everything, Olive." "I know." I spread Maria's documents across Alina's desk. "But it also gives us leverage we never expected." Wyatt leaned forward in his chair, examining a particularly damning financial statement. "We need to move carefully. One wrong step, and this could all backfire spectacularly." "Or we could end up like Mom," Desmond added from his spot by the window. Alina stopped pacing. "He's right. This isn't just about exposing corruption anymore. We're dealing with someone who's willing to commit murder to protect his secrets." My phone buzzed. Another call from our father. Fifth one today. I silenced it. "He's getting nervous," Wyatt observed. "The campaign's making him vulnerable. He knows it." "Good." I pulled out my laptop. "Maria's given us access to the board's private servers. Look at this." I pulled up a series of transactions, each more suspicious than the last. Money flowing through dozens of shell companies, always ending up in political action committees supporting my father's various initiatives. "Jesus," Alina whispered, leaning over my shoulder. "How long has this been going on?" "At least 15 years, Wyatt said. "Around the time your mother died." Desmond's phone chimed. Maria just sent more. Dad's calling an emergency board meeting tomorrow morning. He suspects something, I said. We need to move faster. No. Wyatt's voice was firm. That's exactly what we can't do. Rush this and we'll miss something crucial. He's survived this long because he's careful. A knock at the door made us all jump. Alina's assistant poked her head in. Sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here insisting on seeing Olive. Says she's from the board. My heart stopped. What's her name? Jessica? No. Janet? Julia? Desmond asked sharply. Yes, that's it. I exchanged looks with Desmond. Julia had been our mother's secretary before the accident. She'd quit immediately after, disappeared completely. Send her in, I said. Julia looked older, grayer, but her eyes were still sharp as she entered. I saw the press conference, she said without preamble. When I heard about the inheritance transfer, I knew. You're going after him, aren't you? Why are you here, Julia? Desmond asked. She reached into her bag, pulled out a sealed envelope. Your mother gave this to me the day before she died. Said if anything happened to her, I should keep it safe until her children were ready. My hands shook as I took the envelope. Inside was a single USB drive and a handwritten note. For Olive and Desmond, when the time comes to face the truth, love, Mom. I've been watching, Julia continued, waiting for signs that you were finally moving against him. The inheritance transfer was the first. The campaign announcement confirmed it. What's on the drive? I asked. Everything. Your mother was thorough. She documented it all. The bribes, the threats, the shell companies. She even recorded conversations. Wyatt plugged the drive into his laptop. Files upon files appeared. Audio recordings, scanned documents, photographs. 15 years of evidence, preserved by a mother who knew she might not live to use it. Holy shit, Alina breathed, scrolling through the files. This is everything we need, and more. Why didn't you come forward before? Desmond demanded of Julia. Your mother's note said to wait until you were ready, until you started moving against him yourselves. She stood up. I should go. He still has people watching me. Wait, I called as she reached the door. Did you know what he was going to do to her? Julia's eyes filled with tears. No, but I suspected. We all did. That's why I kept this safe all these years. She knew the risks, but she never stopped fighting for the truth. For you. After she left, we sat in stunned silence, the weight of our mother's final gift hanging heavy in the air. We need to move some of this evidence to secure locations, Wyatt finally said. Multiple copies, different places. I'll handle that, Alina offered. I have contacts who can help. My phone buzzed again, a text this time. Olive, my office, 8 a.m. tomorrow, non-negotiable. Dad. He's making his move, Desmond said, reading over my shoulder. Good, I stood up, gathering the documents. Let him. Everything's different now. Mom made sure of that. Olive, Wyatt warned, don't get cocky. He's still dangerous. I know. I looked at the team we'd assembled, my brother, my best friend, my mentor, and now my mother's final act of protection. But so are we. We worked late into the night, organizing evidence, planning our next moves. Mom's files filled in every gap in our case, provided context for every suspicious transaction we'd uncovered. Tomorrow, I'd face my father across his desk one more time. But now I had something he didn't expect, a mother's love, reaching across years to deliver justice. Ready for tomorrow? Desmond asked as we finally prepared to leave. I thought of Mom, of her courage, of her faith in us. More than ready. It's time to end this. 8 a.m. found me in my father's office, watching him read through campaign briefings as if I wasn't even there. The morning sun cast long shadows across his desk, highlighting the silver in his hair. You've been avoiding my calls, he said finally, not looking up. I've been busy. Too busy for family dinner tonight? Your brother's coming. Maria, too. I kept my face neutral, though my heart raced. Wouldn't miss it. He set down his papers, fixing me with that penetrating stare that used to terrify me as a child. What's going on with you and Desmond? Nothing's going on. Don't lie to me. He stood up, walking to his wall of windows. You two have been meeting secretly, having whispered conversations, drawing my board members into your little conspiracy. Paranoid much, Dad? He turned sharply. You think I don't have eyes everywhere? That I don't know about your meetings with Wyatt? With Alina? They're my friends, my colleagues. They're threats to everything we've built. He moved closer, his voice dropping. Just like your mother was. The air left my lungs. What did you just say? You heard me. His eyes were cold, calculating. Your mother never understood the necessity of certain arrangements. She let her morality blind her to the bigger picture. I see the same weakness in you. Is that what you told yourself? My voice shook with rage. When you had her killed, that she was weak? He didn't even flinch. So, Julia finally showed up with that drive. I wondered when she would. You knew? Of course I knew. I've known for years, but the evidence was circumstantial, the recordings inadmissible. Your mother was careless, like you're being careless now. My phone buzzed in my pocket, probably Desmond warning me about dinner. I ignored it. Here's what's going to happen, my father continued, sitting back at his desk. You're going to drop whatever misguided crusade you're planning. You and Desmond will publicly support my campaign. In return, I'll restore your inheritance, double it even. And if I refuse? He smiled, the same smile I'd seen in photographs with business partners who later committed suicide or disappeared. Ask your mother. You're threatening your own children? I'm protecting my legacy. He picked up a pen, started signing documents. You have until dinner tonight to decide. Bring Desmond with you. 7 p.m. sharp. I stood up, my legs surprisingly steady. You know what your problem is, Dad? You're so focused on your legacy, you forgot about Mom's. He looked up. What's that supposed to mean? Guess you'll find out at dinner. I walked to the door, then turned back. Oh, and Dad? Mom wasn't careless. She was brilliant. She just played a longer game than you expected. I made it to my car before the shaking started. Desmond answered on the first ring. He knows, I said. How much? About the drive, about Julia. He's demanding we back off or else. Shit. A pause. What about dinner tonight? We're going, but first, we need to see Alina and Wyatt, now. An hour later, we sat in Alina's office, planning our counter move. He's desperate, Wyatt said, making threats this openly. He's scared. Good, Desmond replied. Let him sweat. Alina spread out the latest documents from Maria. The DA's office is ready. One word from us and they move. Not yet, I said. First, we do dinner. Are you crazy? Desmond stood up. He basically admitted to killing Mom. He threatened us directly. Exactly. I pulled out my phone, showing them the recording app that had been running during my entire meeting with our father. And now we have him on tape. Alina's eyes widened. You recorded him? Mom's files showed he was always careful about phones and emails. But in his office, in person, that's where he feels safe. That's where he slips up. Like he just did, Wyatt said slowly, admitting he knew about the drive, implying involvement in your mother's death. It's not enough for a conviction, Alina cautioned, but combined with everything else, it's enough to scare him, I finished. At dinner tonight, we let him think he's won. Then tomorrow morning, we end this, Desmond said firmly. My phone buzzed again, a text from Maria. Your father's called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. first item on the agenda, removing me from the board. Perfect timing, I said, showing them the message. He's making all the moves we expected. You really think this will work? Desmond asked. I thought of our mother, meticulously gathering evidence even as she knew what it might cost her. Mom believed in justice enough to die for it. The least we can do is live for it. 7 p.m., Alina reminded us. Be careful. Always am, I said, gathering my things. After all, I learned from the best. Dad? Desmond asked. No, I smiled. Mom. The dining room at my father's house felt like a stage set for a Greek tragedy. Crystal glasses caught the chandelier light, casting prism shadows across the white tablecloth. Maria sat to my father's right, her face a careful mask. Desmond and I took our usual places across from each other. Wine? My father lifted a bottle of expensive Bordeaux. Please, I said, watching him pour. His hands were steady. They'd always been steady, even when delivering the news of Mom's death. Now, he said, setting down the bottle, shall we discuss your decision? Actually, Desmond spoke up, I'd like to read something first. He pulled out his notebook. Our father sighed. Must we? It's short, Desmond assured him. I wrote it specially for tonight. Maria gripped her wine glass tighter as Desmond began to read. In Mother's garden, roses bloom, where secrets lie beneath the loam. Truth plants its seeds in darkness deep until the day they break for home. The silence that followed was deafening. Interesting choice of subject, our father said quietly. Your mother's garden died with her. Did it? I asked. Or did it just go dormant, waiting for the right time to bloom? His fork clinked against his plate. I've had enough of these metaphors. What's your answer? About the campaign? I took a sip of wine. We've decided to support you fully. He relaxed slightly. Good. I'm glad you've seen reason. In fact, Desmond added, we've prepared a statement for tomorrow's board meeting about family unity and all that. Excellent, our father smiled. Maria, you'll be there, of course? Wouldn't miss it, she said softly. My phone buzzed. A text from Alina. Everything's in place for tomorrow. DA's office standing by. No phones at dinner, our father chided. I put it away. Sorry, work never stops. Speaking of work, he continued, I've been thinking about your role at the firm, Olive. Perhaps it's time you took on more responsibility, left that civil rights nonsense behind. Like Mom left her principles behind? The words slipped out before I could stop them. His face hardened. Your mother made her choices. Did she? Desmond's voice was sharp. Or did you make them for her? Careful, son. Or what? I leaned forward. Her brake lines might fail, too. Maria's wine glass shattered in her hand, red liquid spreading across white linen like blood. Oh, dear, she said, standing quickly. I should clean up. Sit down, Maria. Our father's voice was steel. All of you, sit down. We sat. Now listen carefully, he continued. Tomorrow's board meeting is crucial. The campaign announcement follows immediately after. You will all play your parts perfectly. No poems, no accusations, no clever little hints about the past. Am I clear? Crystal, I said, meeting his gaze. We know exactly what's expected of us. Good. He dabbed his mouth with a napkin. Now, who's ready for dessert? Later, in the driveway, Desmond grabbed my arm. Did you see his face when I read the poem? Yeah, he knows we know. Think he suspects about tomorrow? No. I look back at the house. His ego won't let him imagine we could actually hurt him. My phone buzzed again. Wyatt this time. Media alert prepared. Waiting for your signal. Everything's ready, I told Desmond. Alina has the legal documents. Wyatt has the press release. Maria has the board presentation. And the DA has Mom's files. What if he runs? He won't. I got into my car. He thinks he's untouchable. That's always been his weakness. Olive? Desmond leaned in through the window. What if? What if we're wrong? What if he's prepared for this? I thought of the recording from this morning, safely backed up in 3 different locations. He's good at playing chess, Des, but Mom taught us to play the long game. She knew someday we'd need to. See you tomorrow then, front row for the fireworks. Wouldn't miss it. I started the engine. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we honor Mom's legacy. As I drove home, my phone lit up with one final text. From my father. Proud of you both for making the right choice. Everything will be perfect tomorrow. I smiled, thinking of Mom's garden metaphor in Desmond's poem. Tomorrow, the seeds she'd planted 15 years ago would finally break through to the surface. Tomorrow, truth would bloom in all its terrible beauty. And our father? He'd learned that some legacies can't be buried, no matter how deep you dig the grave. I sent a group text to our coalition. Everything's set. See you all tomorrow. Remember, timing is everything. Then I turned off my phone and poured myself a whiskey. One last quiet night before the storm. Mom's favorite saying echoed in my mind. The truth always rises. Tomorrow, it would rise like a flood. The boardroom buzzed with nervous energy. My father stood at the head of the table, shuffling through his campaign notes while board members filed in. Desmond sat beside me, his leg bouncing under the table. Maria took her usual seat, pale but composed. Before we begin, my father announced, I'd like my daughter to say a few words about family unity and our campaign vision. I stood, smoothing my skirt. Actually, Dad, I think Maria has something to present first. His head snapped up. That's not on the agenda. Consider it an amendment. Maria's voice was steady as she connected her laptop to the projector. As a board member, I have the right to present evidence of financial misconduct. The room went silent. My father's smile turned dangerous. Maria, think carefully about what you're doing. I have. She clicked a button, and the first document appeared on screen. For 15 years, what followed was devastating. Transaction records, offshore accounts, recorded conversations, including his threat to me from yesterday. Board members leaned forward, faces shifting from confusion to shock to anger. This is absurd, my father sputtered. These documents are clearly fabricated. Are they? I pulled out my phone, played the recording from our dinner. His voice filled the room. Your mother made her choices. The door opened. Wyatt walked in, followed by 2 police detectives and the district attorney. Harold, the DA said, we need to talk. This is a private meeting, my father snapped. Not anymore. One of the detectives stepped forward. We have a warrant for your arrest. On what charges? Financial fraud, corruption, conspiracy to commit murder. The detective glanced at his notepad. Want me to continue? My father laughed, but I heard the edge of panic. This is ridiculous. Olive, tell them. Tell them what, Dad? That you had Mom killed because she was going to expose you? That you've been threatening your own children? You ungrateful, he lunged forward, but Desmond stepped between us. Don't, my brother said quietly. It's over. The boardroom doors burst open again. Reporters flooded in, cameras flashing. Wyatt had timed the press release perfectly. Mr. Bennett, is it true you're being investigated for your wife's death? Did you threaten your children? What about the campaign funds? My father straightened his tie, trying to regain control. No comment. My lawyer will. Actually, Alina stepped forward, legal documents in hand. The firm's board has just voted to freeze all accounts pending investigation, including your personal assets. You can't do that? We just did. Maria stood up. The vote was unanimous. The detectives moved closer. Sir, please place your hands behind your back. For a moment, I thought he might resist. Then his shoulders slumped, and I saw something I'd never seen before: defeat. As they let him out, he turned to me. "I did everything for this family." "No," I said. "You did everything for yourself. Mom did everything for the family." Desmond pulled out his notebook one last time. "Hey, Dad, one more poem before you go. Empire falls on feet of clay. Truth rises like the morning sun. Mother's garden blooms today. Justice's work is finally done." The media frenzy that followed was intense. Desmond and I watched from Alina's office as every major network covered the story. Prominent lawyer arrested, mayoral campaign in ruins, decades of corruption exposed. "Mom would be proud," Desmond said softly. "She knew we'd figure it out eventually." I handed him a file. "Look what Julia found in Mom's old office." Inside were 2 letters, dated the week before her death, one for each of us. Desmond's hands shook as he read his. She knew, Olive. She knew what he might do, but she kept gathering evidence anyway. Because she believed we'd finish what she started. I wiped away tears. She believed in justice more than she feared him. My phone buzzed. "Maria." "Board voted. You're both reinstated as equal partners. When you're ready, the firm is yours to reform." "What do you think?" I asked Desmond. "Ready to help me turn Dad's empire into something Mom would be proud of?" He smiled. "Think they'll let me add a poetry division?" A knock at the door, Wyatt with more news. "DA wants to meet. They're offering your father a deal, but they need your statements first." "Tell them we'll be there." I stood up, gathering our mother's letters. "But first, Desmond and I have somewhere to go." We drove to the cemetery in silence. Mom's grave was simple, elegant, everything she'd been in life. We laid fresh roses, and Desmond read his poem one more time. "We did it, Mom," I whispered. "Your garden's blooming again." As we walked back to the car, Desmond grabbed my hand. "What now, sis?" I thought of all the work ahead: reforming the firm, rebuilding our family's legacy, ensuring justice was served. Now, we make sure the truth stays in the light where it belongs. Together? Together. I squeezed his hand. Just like Mom always wanted. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters as I walked out into the autumn sunshine. Desmond waited by the car, notebook in hand as always. 25 years, he said as I approached. "Think it's enough? For fraud and conspiracy? Yes." I loosened my court attire scarf. For Mom, nothing would be enough. Our father had taken the plea deal, avoiding a public trial that would have dragged our family's name through even more mud. His final words to the judge had been, predictably, about legacy and necessity. "Ready to go?" Desmond asked. "One more stop first." We drove to Bennett and Associates, soon to be renamed Justice Partners. The building looked different now, less imposing somehow. Maria met us in the lobby. "The last of the restitution payments went out this morning," she said, walking us to the elevator. "Every client who was defrauded has been made whole." "And the pro bono program?" I asked. "Fully funded. Your mother would love what you're doing with her inheritance." In my office, our father's old office, Alina and Wyatt waited with champagne. "To justice," Wyatt proposed, raising his glass. "To family," Desmond added. "To Mom," I said softly. As we drank, I noticed Desmond fidgeting with his notebook. "What is it?" "I found something in Dad's personal files. A letter Mom wrote to him the day before." He pulled out a folded page. "Think we should read it?" The room went quiet. Maria touched my arm. "Whatever you decide, we're here." I took the letter, unfolded it carefully. "Harold, by the time you read this, you'll have made your choice. I hope, for our children's sake, you choose truth over power. But I know you won't. I've watched you build this empire on lies, telling yourself it was for the family. But families aren't built on secrets and fear. They're built on love and truth. Olive and Desmond are stronger than you know, smarter than you give them credit for. One day, they'll see through the mirrors you've placed around them. When that day comes, I hope they'll remember to choose justice over vengeance. I've made my choice. Whatever happens to me, the truth will rise. With hope for your redemption, Margaret. Silence filled the office. Then Desmond laughed softly. What? I asked. She knew. She knew we'd end up right here, in this office, reading this letter. She played the longest game of all. Speaking of games, Alina interjected, the press is waiting downstairs. They want a statement about the firm's new direction. I looked around at our unlikely coalition, my poetic brother, my mother's loyal friend, my trusted mentor, my fierce ally. Let's give them something worth reporting. Downstairs, cameras flashed as Desmond and I stepped up to the microphones. He spoke first, clear and strong. Today marks a new chapter, not just for our firm, but for our family's legacy. My sister and I are announcing the creation of the Margaret Bennett Foundation for Legal Justice. I stepped forward. Using the recovered funds and our personal inheritance, we're establishing a network of legal clinics across the city. Every person deserves access to justice, regardless of their ability to pay. And poetry workshops, Desmond added with a grin, because sometimes justice needs a creative touch. The reporters laughed. Questions flew. What about your father's political connections? Will you continue his business relationships? How do you respond to criticism about family loyalty? I held up my hand. Our loyalty was always to the truth. That's our family's real legacy, not the one our father tried to build, but the one our mother died protecting. Back in the office, I found Julia waiting with a small package. Found this in your mother's old files, she said. Thought you might want it. Inside was a garden trowel, worn with use, and a packet of rose seeds. A note read, "For when it's time to plant a new garden." Desmond appeared at my shoulder. Mom's favorite roses. Think they'll grow here? I gestured to the office's small balcony. Only one way to find out. Together, we stepped out into the sunlight. The city spread below us, not as a kingdom to be conquered, but as a community to be served. While Desmond prepared the soil in a large planter, I opened the seed packet. You know, he said, Dad always said you can't build a legacy on ideals. Dad was wrong about a lot of things. I planted the first seed. Mom knew better. She did, Maria said from the doorway, and so do you. I looked at the tiny seeds in my palm, so small yet containing so much potential, like truth, like justice, like love. Ready to grow something new? I asked Desmond. He smiled, taking a handful of seeds. Together. And there, high above the city our father had tried to own, we planted our mother's roses, seeds of truth in soil nourished by justice, waiting to bloom.
Mom, can we go on the yacht? Adrian's eyes sparkled with excitement. Melissa gazed at her son's hopeful expression while repeatedly reading the email from her mother displayed on her monitor. The June sunlight illuminated her office in the accounting firm, housed in one of the high-rise buildings in the Old Port Historic District. Through the window, the calm waters of Casco Bay stretched out in brilliant blue. Yes, Grandma has invited us, Melissa replied with a gentle smile, though her words carried a hint of hesitation. Behind that smile lay deep concern, and her fingertips trembled slightly over the keyboard. Adrian, promise me something. Stay close to me no matter what happens. Melissa spoke softly as she touched her son's soft cheek. Adrian, though young, seemed to sense the anxiety in his mother's voice and nodded emphatically. 2 years had passed since her father's death. From that day forward, her mother and sister's attitudes had changed dramatically. When they discovered that their father had secretly transferred the patent rights to Melissa, her mother's eyes held a coldness she had never seen before. That patent, which generated annual revenue of $1 million, had created an irreparable rift in the family. The company for your sister Caroline, and the patent rights for you. What a selfish decision. Her mother's words cut like a knife. Dressed in luxury brands, she appeared more like a female CEO robbed of her inheritance than a widow grieving the loss of her husband. Since then, family gatherings had become frigid affairs. Their treatment of Adrian, in particular, had changed as if he were an unwanted presence. At Christmas gatherings, while other grandchildren received piles of presents, Adrian's gift was merely a modest stationery set. Melissa could never forget her son's forlorn expression that day. "We're nothing but strangers now." The words her sister Caroline had thrown at her during a party still stung in her heart. Once as close as best friends, Caroline now managed the company as their mother's right hand, and her eyes held nothing but cold contempt when looking at Melissa. The morning of the cruise dawned with gentle early summer sunshine enveloping the harbor. Her mother and sister's appearance as they stepped out of a brand new Mercedes parked on Commercial Street seemed somehow unnatural. Their overly cheerful greetings and excessive displays of intimacy only heightened Melissa's anxiety. "My, Adrian. You're quite tanned. Can't you even afford a cheap parasol for him?" At her mother's sarcastic remark, Adrian instinctively moved closer to his mother, as if seeking shelter behind her. Melissa gently pulled her son closer while internally heaving a deep sigh. The luxurious yacht could accommodate 12 passengers. However, the atmosphere separating the 4 family members standing on deck was deeper than the vast ocean. Her sister, dressed in a white sundress, deliberately maintained her distance from Melissa. "What a lovely yacht, Mother." Melissa's comment was met with only a perfunctory smile. She unconsciously tightened her grip on Adrian's small hand. Something was going to happen. That premonition squeezed at her heart. The white sails caught the wind as the yacht slowly pulled away from the shore. As the mainland receded into the distance, Melissa's inner anxiety transformed into certainty. This invitation had some ulterior motive. Gripped by an ominous feeling that came in waves, she held her son even closer. The sea breeze flowed pleasantly into the yacht's main dining room. The setting sun cast soft light upon the table set with elegant dinnerware. However, this beautiful space was filled with heavy tension. Melissa felt uneasy about the deliberately arranged seating positions. Her mother Virginia occupied the head of the table, with Caroline stationed at her right hand. Melissa and Adrian had been guided to seats nearest to the exit. "How do you find the Maine lobster?" Her mother's voice dripped with artificial politeness. As she tilted her expensive wine glass, her gaze toward Melissa harbored something malicious. "It's delicious. Thank you, Mother." "Mom, this soup is yummy too." Adrian's innocent comment was met with a moment of silence. Caroline exchanged meaningful glances with her mother. "Yes, the clam chowder is this restaurant's specialty. But I suppose you can't afford such luxurious meals every day, can you?" At her mother's sarcastic words, Melissa momentarily lowered her eyes. Feeling Adrian's expression cloud over, she responded quietly. We live quite happily within our means. Yes, thanks to Father's patent. Caroline's voice rang out, cold as ice. She slowly raised her red wine, holding the glass up to the setting sun. Her gesture barely concealed calculated malice. That patent should have belonged to the company. But Father transferred it to you for some reason. How curious. That was Father's wish, Caroline. His wish. Virginia sneered. His judgment was clouded toward the end. You must have influenced him somehow. Mother, that's... Be quiet. Virginia's sharp voice rang out. Adrian trembled slightly. Melissa instinctively grabbed her son's hand. You were always shrewd. Even when you got divorced, you had the company pay your settlement. That's not true. You're such a liar, Caroline interjected. I know you were leaking company secrets to Father. What are you? I have proof. Caroline pulled out her smartphone, appearing ready to show some images. However, it was clearly a provocation. Melissa squeezed her son's hand tightly. Adrian, would you play on deck until dessert time? Don't worry. I'll come get you soon. Adrian looked at his mother anxiously but did as he was told and left the dining room. Watching his retreating figure, Melissa exhaled deeply. Finally, the nuisance is gone, Virginia said. Let's get to the point. About transferring the patent rights. Her mother continued in a lowered voice. Would you consider returning them to the company? What do you mean? It's simple. Sell the patent rights to the company. Of course, we'll pay you fair compensation. Melissa silently stared at her mother. Virginia took an elegant sip of wine and continued. How about $5 million? It's not a small sum. You know that's less than half its true value. Don't be greedy, Caroline laughed coldly. We're being generous here. Father entrusted this patent to me. For the company's future. The company's future. Virginia raised her voice. All the more reason. What can you possibly do with it? I have plans. Using this patent. Don't make me laugh. Caroline's voice rang out sharply. She stood up and walked over to Melissa's seat. What can you possibly do? A mere accountant can't manage patents for a major company. Melissa remained seated in silence. The waves had grown slightly stronger. Think it over, her mother said, as if delivering an ultimatum. This is your last chance. I decline. A moment of silence. Then her mother's expression changed completely. You two don't deserve such a luxurious meal. Her voice no longer held any pretense of civility. Caroline smirked while sipping her wine. We'll enjoy the cruise. You can enjoy the ocean. Before Melissa could comprehend the meaning of those words, she felt herself being pushed with great force. As she lost her balance, she desperately tried to grab the edge of the table, but her fingers clutched at empty air. She heard Adrian scream as he returned to the deck. He ran to help his mother, but Caroline deliberately extended her leg. Adrian stumbled and was thrown into the dark sea just like his mother. The cold seawater enveloped them both. As Melissa desperately searched for her son among the waves, her mother's final words pierced her ears. Goodbye. The yacht abandoned them, disappearing into the twilight sea. Cold seawater surrounded her entire body. Melissa desperately searched for Adrian. In the twilight waters, she could see her son's small head bobbing on the surface. Adrian! Can you hear Mom's voice? Rocked by the waves, Melissa began swimming toward her son. Fortunately, the sea was relatively calm. She was grateful now that she had enrolled him in children's swimming lessons. That thought brought a small warmth to her heart. I'm okay. Adrian's voice carried surprising composure. The swimming skills he had developed at weekend swim school were now saving his life. Don't move from there. I'm coming to you. As Melissa approached her son, she quickly surveyed their surroundings. The yacht's lights were already distant, fading into the twilight. Though it was June, the seawater was colder than she had imagined. Suddenly, something glinted beneath her feet. Melissa dove deep and grabbed it. An orange life jacket. It must have fallen overboard with the table during their fall. Adrian, put this on. As she helped her son into the life jacket, Melissa calmly analyzed their situation. The current was flowing eastward. Land couldn't be too far away. But would any boats pass by at this hour? Mom, I'm cold. Adrian's voice trembled. Melissa embraced her son, sharing body heat. It's all right. Someone will come for us. Those words were meant to encourage herself as well. In the distance, she could faintly hear an engine sound. Melissa called out desperately. Help! Someone! Adrian began to cry out too, his small voice joining hers. Their voices echoed across the quiet sea surface. The engine sound gradually grew louder. An old fishing boat slowly approached. The white-haired man standing at the bow threw them a life preserver. Grab hold. Melissa helped her son onto the boat first, then climbed aboard herself. Lying on the deck, she exhaled deeply. I'm Joe Murphy, the white-haired man introduced himself. I was fishing nearby when I heard the screams. Murphy smiled kindly as he offered them blankets. His warm gaze brought tears to Melissa's eyes. Thank you. I'm Melissa Williams. This is my son Adrian. Williams. Murphy's expression changed. From that real estate company. Melissa nodded silently. Murphy seemed about to say something but held back. Well, let's get you to the harbor. But how did you end up in the sea at this hour? Just then, Melissa's pants pocket glowed. Her cell phone, protected in a waterproof case, had miraculously survived. Mr. Murphy, would you keep this phone as evidence? My mother and sister tried to kill us. Murphy's expression turned grave. As the harbor union chief, he was an influential figure in the community. Everyone knew of his strong sense of justice. Tell me everything. Melissa told him everything, the changes after her father's death, the conflict over the patent rights, and the events of that night. Murphy listened in silence, but his eyes burned with anger. Unforgivable, Murphy said in a heavy voice. Using money as an excuse to their own daughter and grandson. Adrian clung to his mother while wrapped in the blanket. The trembling of his small body squeezed at Melissa's heart. "I have friends at the harbor," Murphy continued with determination. "There should be witnesses too." The fishing boat slowly approached the harbor. The city lights reflected on the dark water surface. "But their yacht is all ready." "Don't worry," Murphy said. "A yacht that size definitely leaves a trail. Plus, there are harbor surveillance cameras." Indeed. The departure records, security camera footage, and the phone recording. These would all serve as evidence. "Mr. Murphy, will you help us?" "Of course," Murphy answered firmly. "There are people in this town who think they can control everything with money. They need to be taught about justice." Then Adrian spoke in a small voice. "Mom, why did Grandma and Auntie try to kill us?" Melissa held her son tightly. There could be no adequate answer to such an innocent question. Sometimes people's hearts become clouded by money. "But we have something more important." "Something important?" "Yes. The bond between you and me." Adrian nodded silently. His eyes held a deep understanding despite his young age. When the fishing boat reached the harbor, several other fishing boats had already gathered. Murphy's friends. Some had gone to secure the surveillance camera footage. "Let's hold off on contacting the police," Murphy said. "They can't move until we have evidence anyway." The sound of an ambulance siren approached. Murphy's wife had arranged for it. "Stay at our place tonight," Murphy said kindly. "Mary will be glad to have you." Melissa bowed deeply. The warmth of these strangers gradually warmed her chilled body. After receiving basic treatment in the ambulance, Melissa and Adrian headed to the Murphy home. A warm light flickered in the old fisherman's house. Mary, who greeted them at the entrance, rushed over as soon as she saw them. "You poor dears," she said in a voice full of motherly love. "Come, I've prepared some warm soup." The aroma of clam chowder wafted from the kitchen. Unlike the expensive version they had tasted on the yacht hours ago, this carried a simple, heartfelt fragrance. "The battle begins tomorrow," Murphy said quietly. "But don't worry. There are still people in this town who believe in justice." Melissa nodded silently. Her mother and sister probably never imagined that their arrogant actions would provoke such anger from so many people. "Mom," Adrian squeezed his mother's hand. "We'll win, right?" "Yes, absolutely," Melissa answered firmly. "We have justice on our side." A heavy atmosphere hung over the police station in the early morning. In the chief's office, Melissa played the recorded audio. Her mother and sister's cold voices echoed in the quiet room. "This is decisive evidence of attempted murder." Veteran Detective Thomas Riley nodded with a grave expression. Several pieces of evidence were already laid out on his desk: harbor surveillance camera footage, yacht navigation data, and witness statements. "Arrest warrants have already been issued for Mrs. Williams and Caroline Williams," Detective Riley announced quietly. "The arrest team is en route now." Murphy stood silently with his arms crossed. His presence had helped expedite the police response. "Are mother and sister still on the yacht?" "No," Detective Riley pointed to a map. "We've confirmed they disembarked at another harbor last night and headed to Mrs. Williams's vacation home." Just then, the detective's radio crackled. Her mother and sister had been arrested. In the police station's interrogation room, her mother sat handcuffed in her expensive suit. Beside her, her sister hung her head, her makeup smeared. Security camera footage played before them. "Do you still claim this was an accidental fall?" Detective Riley's voice rang out sharply. "Call my lawyer," her mother said coldly. "I have the right to remain silent." "Indeed," the detective nodded quietly. "Then how about this audio?" The recording played, the dinner conversation, the words just before the fall, and the decisive goodbye. Her mother's expression twisted slightly. "We have sufficient evidence," the detective continued. "Attempted murder, conspiracy, and evidence tampering. The maximum sentence could be life imprisonment." Just then, the room's door opened. It was Melissa. Her mother and sister's expressions froze. The daughter they thought dead stood before them. "How?" Her mother's voice trembled. "Surprised?" Melissa asked quietly. "Did you think we were dead?" Her sister Caroline began to laugh hysterically. "Lies. These are all Melissa's lies. We didn't do anything." "Do you really think so?" Melissa took out her phone. "Look at this." The screen showed footage from the yacht dinner. Melissa had secretly recorded everything, the moment her mother pushed her, the moment Caroline tripped Adrian. Everything was documented. "Why?" Her mother's voice trembled. "Why such preparation?" "Seeing how you both changed, I sensed something might happen." Melissa stared into her mother's eyes. They no longer held any of their former warmth. "We could have discussed the patent issue." "Discussion?" her mother sneered. "That patent belongs to the company. It can't be entrusted to someone like you." "Do you really think so?" Melissa pulled out a document. "This is Father's letter. It explains why he entrusted the patent to me." Her mother silently stared at the letter. It contained her husband's final thoughts. "Melissa has integrity. She can see the company beyond just numbers, she sees it through the heart of its people. With my patent, I trust she will put it to proper use." "Father believed in me," Melissa continued quietly. "But mother, you trampled on his wishes." "Be quiet," her mother shouted. "You're no daughter of mine." Just then, small footsteps were heard from the hallway. Adrian peeked timidly through the door, with Mrs. Murphy watching over him from behind. "Adrian." Her mother's voice trembled for the first time. At the sight of her grandson, her mask began to crumble. Adrian slowly approached his grandmother. "Grandma, why did you try to kill us?" At this pure inquiry, her mother was lost for words. As if finally realizing the weight of her actions, her shoulders began to shake. I. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Human emotion flooded out from beneath the mask of arrogance. "I'm sorry." Her mother's apology was also her final resistance. She quickly suppressed her emotions and regained her cold expression. "This isn't over." "No, it certainly isn't," Melissa answered quietly. "The trial will reveal everything." Several weeks later, in the courtroom, the judge's solemn voice rang out. "The defendant, Virginia Williams, is hereby sentenced to 5 years in prison for attempted murder and conspiracy." Then came the sister's sentence. The defendant, Caroline Williams, is hereby sentenced to 3 years in prison for aiding and abetting attempted murder. The courtroom fell silent. Her mother and sister accepted their sentences stoically. But their eyes already reflected the color of defeat. Outside the courthouse, a crowd of reporters waited. The attempted murder case involving prominent local figures had become national news. "Justice has been served," Murphy said. Melissa nodded quietly. Beside her, Adrian held her hand tightly. "Mom, is it over?" "Yes," Melissa embraced her son. "Now we can start our new life." On the drive home, the ocean viewed through the car window shone more brilliantly blue than that day. The light reflecting off the waves seemed to signal hope for the future. Justice always prevails. At Melissa's words, Adrian nodded firmly. A new life for mother and son was about to begin. Early summer, 1 year later. In their new house in the Old Port Historic District, Melissa gazed at the morning sun. In the garden, flowers planted by Adrian bloomed in various colors. "Mom, I'm ready." Turning at Adrian's voice, she saw her son in his swimming championship uniform. Since that incident, he had become even more dedicated to swimming. He had faced the water continuously as a way to overcome his fear. "It's the finals today," Melissa hugged her son's shoulders. "Are you nervous?" "Nope," Adrian shook his head firmly. "Grandpa Murphy said he's coming too." At the pool side of the competition venue, a large crowd had already gathered. Among them was a familiar white-haired man. "Adrian." Murphy waved. Beside him were his wife Mary and their fisher friends. "Go for it, young dolphin." Adrian responded to their cheers with a beaming smile. Melissa reflected on the changes over the past year. After the incident, the Murphy family had become their emotional support. Weekly dinner gatherings, fishing experiences, and above all, unconditional love. The whistle blew and the race began. Adrian's swimming no longer showed any trace of fear. He pulled ahead of the other competitors, cutting through the water's surface powerfully. "Go!" Loud cheers rose from the spectator seats. Melissa watched her son with tender eyes. Touch! The scoreboard lit up with "first place." As Adrian emerged from the water, congratulatory cheers erupted from all around. "Congratulations, champion." Murphy rushed over and lifted Adrian high. His smile was filled with grandfatherly affection. "This calls for a celebration," Mary said. "Tonight, it's my special clam chowder." On the way home, Adrian spoke quietly in the car. "Mom, I wonder how Grandma and Aunt Caroline are doing." Melissa felt her hands tighten on the steering wheel. Her mother was serving her sentence in prison. So was her sister. Though visits were permitted, she hadn't yet found the courage. "I'm sure they're spending time reflecting." "You know," Adrian continued with a serious expression, "I'm not scared anymore. Because we have a new family now." Those words brought tears to Melissa's eyes. Indeed, they had gained a new family. Though not bound by blood, they were bound by ties of the heart, an irreplaceable family. The company's reconstruction was also progressing steadily. New products utilizing her father's patent were receiving high market evaluation. However, What Melissa focused on most was building trust relationships with employees. A company moves by the hearts of its people. She had made her father's words from the letter her management philosophy. Beyond quarterly financial reports, she regularly held dialogue sessions with employees. This approach was drawing attention in the industry. One day, during a dinner gathering at the Murphy home, an unexpected topic arose. "Melissa," Murphy began quietly, "there's a letter from the prison." It was from her mother. Opening it with trembling hands, she found words of apology written in small letters. "I don't expect forgiveness. I'm just truly glad that you and Adrian are safe." At the end of the letter was an old family photograph. Young Melissa and her mother smiled brightly. Where had that pure love from those days gone? Can people change? Melissa wondered. Mary smiled gently at her question. That depends on the person. But it's important to give them a chance. That night, after Adrian had gone to bed, Melissa wrote a long letter. A reply to her mother. "We were indeed hurt. But that hurt taught us something, what true family means." She enclosed a photo of Adrian's swimming competition with the letter. Her mother had 4 years left to serve. Melissa hoped that during that time, they could gradually repair their relationship. Letters had started coming from her sister Caroline as well. Her writing no longer showed any trace of her former arrogance, instead conveying sincere regret. "I want to start over. After my release, I'll begin everything anew." A new season was approaching the harbor town. People gathered for Sunday barbecue in the Murphys' garden. Children ran around on the lawn while adults chatted peacefully. "Hey, Mom," Adrian said while munching on a hamburger, "we're happy, aren't we?" Melissa hugged her son. The sea breeze gently caressed their hair. "Yes, very happy." In the distance, fishing boats quietly returned to port. Their figures seemed to watch over their new life. The dark memories of the past certainly remained in a corner of their hearts. But those memories had made them stronger and taught them the true meaning of happiness. Melissa gazed at her son's profile in the sunset. Surely, various trials still awaited them in the future. But they were no longer afraid. They had formed bonds stronger than blood. "Our new life has just begun." At those words, Adrian nodded firmly. The setting sun over the harbor town gently illuminated mother and son's new step forward. In the mist-shrouded mansion in Brookline, Elizabeth began her morning routine. The old wooden floors creaked as she first headed to the children's rooms. Emma, now in her teenage years, had learned to wake up on her own, but she still seemed to wait for her mother's "good morning," stirring at the sound of the knock on her door. Michael, on the other hand, still needed his mother's help. "Michael, time to wake up." In the room bathed in soft light, Elizabeth gently touched her son's cheek. Michael let out a small groan as he slowly opened his eyes. The maid, Martha, had already prepared breakfast. The table was set with warm croissants, scrambled eggs, and fresh fruit, while the aroma of coffee wafted through the room. James, her husband, was reading the morning paper as usual, occasionally smiling at Elizabeth and the children. "Dad, will you come to my piano recital after school today?" Emma asked hopefully. "I'm sorry, honey. I have an important meeting with a client today. But Mom will record it," and I'll definitely watch it tonight." Though Emma looked a bit disappointed at James's response, she quickly turned to her mother with a bright smile and said, "Then please make sure to record it, okay?" This peaceful daily life began to crumble with one phone call. The call from her family home brought news of Elizabeth's father William's passing. It had been a sudden heart attack. The funeral was conducted solemnly, yet with a warmth that reflected her father's character. The large number of attendees testified to his reputation not only as a pharmaceutical company executive but also as a philanthropist. Elizabeth shared memories with the attendees about visiting orphanages with her father when she was young. He had always said, "Wealth exists to be returned to society." However, after the funeral, the atmosphere around her began to change subtly. When the topic of inheritance arose, her husband's attitude shifted. Though he became even more attentive than before, there was something calculating lurking beneath. What concerned Elizabeth most was the sudden change in her mother-in-law Martha's behavior. Martha, who had previously visited only a few times a year, now started showing up 2 or 3 times a week. While she claimed it was out of concern, Elizabeth couldn't shake the feeling that there was some other motive. She was particularly troubled by how persistently her mother-in-law brought up financial matters. Then, just before Thanksgiving, Martha called with an invitation. "Elizabeth, please celebrate Thanksgiving at our house this year. This is what families do, isn't it?" Despite the gentle tone of voice, an ominous feeling crept into Elizabeth's heart. Still, her own voice sounded surprisingly calm as she replied, "Thank you. I appreciate the invitation." That night, after putting the children to bed, Elizabeth gazed at the full moon from the study window, remembering her last conversation with her father. "Elizabeth, you have the strength to always make the right decisions. I believe in that." Those words now resonated with her like a warning. At dusk on Thanksgiving, Elizabeth paused momentarily before her mother-in-law's front door. The Georgian-style mansion, built in the 1920s, exuded its usual imposing presence. The red brick walls, illuminated by the golden sunset, seemed to be issuing a warning. Today especially, the chrysanthemums in the usually well-tended front garden appeared to cast ominous shadows. "Mom, let's go in." Michael tugged at her sleeve. Beside him, Emma, though wearing the typical difficult expression of adolescence, occasionally glanced at her mother with concern. Elizabeth took a deep breath and reached for the heavy wooden door. When the door opened, Martha greeted them with a broad smile. She was dressed in a full-length Chanel dress with a Cartier necklace gleaming at her throat. Beside her stood James, wearing an Hermès tie and smiling with unusual formality. "Elizabeth, I'm so glad you came. And the children, and James." Her voice showed none of its usual haughtiness. Rather, it was unnaturally friendly. Martha's perfume seemed stronger than usual. Entering the great hall, several guests had already arrived. Elizabeth's attention was drawn to a tall, middle-aged man. Dressed in a gray Brooks Brothers suit with piercing eyes, he was introduced as Attorney Richard Stern. His presence seemed oddly out of place. "I've heard so much about you, Mrs. Walker." Stern's handshake was slightly too long and too firm. Elizabeth shivered at the coldness transmitted through his palm. After brief socializing in the reception room, the party moved to the dining room. Along the way, Elizabeth felt as if the eyes in the portraits lining the hallway were following her. Portraits of 18th-century New England aristocrats seemed to stand as witnesses to tonight's events. The dining table was appropriately lavish for Thanksgiving. The turkey was perfectly roasted, and the vibrant red of the cranberry sauce stimulated the appetite. The sweet potato casserole wafted cinnamon aromas, while the pecan pie had baked to a golden brown, its rich fragrance filling the room. White roses in a Tiffany vase at the center of the table highlighted the elegance of the setting. The crystal chandelier cast graceful light on the silver cutlery. "Elizabeth, try this wine," Martha called out. "I chose it especially for you. It's an Opus 1 2015. The deep ruby liquid was poured into a baccarat crystal glass. Elizabeth accepted it politely. At that moment, the reflected light briefly cast an eerie gleam in Martha's eyes. "Thank you, Mother." As she tilted the glass, rich aromas tickled her nostrils. Notes of cassis and blackberry mingled with subtle hints of vanilla. The first sip was indeed excellent. But immediately after, the strange sensations began. First, a slight numbness in her fingertips. Then, a sudden feeling of heat as if the room's temperature had risen dramatically. Her vision began to blur gradually. The chandelier's light appeared distorted, like a kaleidoscope. Elizabeth tried hurriedly to set down her glass, but her hands wouldn't obey her commands. "Elizabeth, are you all right?" Her husband's voice seemed to come from far away. As she tried to stand, her legs gave way and she stumbled. The expensive Chinese vase on the table appeared to blur and double before her eyes. "Oh my, are you feeling unwell?" Her mother-in-law's voice contained clearly artificial concern. In the periphery of her vision, she vaguely saw Attorney Stern pulling some documents from his leather briefcase. She could hear the children's voices. "Mom." However, Emma and Michael were quickly led to another room. "It's all right, your mother's just tired. Let's watch the Thanksgiving special," she heard her mother-in-law say, as if echoing from a distant cave. Just before losing consciousness, Elizabeth heard fragments of multiple conversations. The voices echoed and sometimes overlapped, seeping into her clouding consciousness. "How's the drug working?" "Just as planned. She'll be completely unconscious in a few minutes." "Are the documents ready?" "Everything's prepared. Including the inheritance renunciation papers." "Quickly, while she's unconscious, get her signature." "Just move her finger. I'll guide her hand." The last thing she heard was her mother-in-law's cold laugh. Then complete darkness fell. The candle flame on the table extinguished along with Elizabeth's consciousness. When consciousness began to return, the first thing she noticed was the smell of antiseptic. As her hearing returned, she could make out the regular beeping of an EKG monitor. The sound of dripping from an 4 marked time like a clock's second hand. Elizabeth slowly opened her eyes. A white ceiling. An unfamiliar hospital room. The characteristic sterile atmosphere of Brigham and Women's Hospital. Outside the window, night had already fallen. Not a single star was visible in Boston's November sky. "Ah, you're awake." Standing beside the bed was her husband James. The same gentle smile as always. But his eyes weren't smiling. In those pupils lurked a cold light that Elizabeth had never seen before. And beside him stood a familiar figure, Attorney Stern, holding what appeared to be an expensive fountain pen. On the hospital room table lay a document. It was a consent form for renouncing inheritance rights. Elizabeth's signature was already there. Her familiar signature. But it was clearly written while she was unconscious. "My signature." When she asked in a hoarse voice, her husband coldly replied. "Yes, the signature is done. You signed it yourself. We have witnesses." The calculating tone in those words no longer attempted to hide itself. At that moment, Elizabeth's last conversation with her father flashed through her mind. Along with the warmth of his hand holding hers on his deathbed, his words came back with crystal clarity. "Elizabeth, you have the strength to always make the right decisions. I believe in that." Yes, this was the beginning of a battle. Elizabeth quietly closed her eyes, steeling herself for the long struggle ahead. For the sake of her children, and to protect her father's legacy, she had to face this injustice. In her heart, a flame of anger began to burn quietly but surely. Elizabeth's steps were still a bit unsteady as she walked down the hospital corridor. 24 hours had passed since the previous night's events, and she had finally received permission from her doctor to leave her room. A nurse in white walked casually beside her. "Mrs. Walker, are you really all right?" The nurse wearing a name tag reading Christine Chen spoke with concern. She had been Elizabeth's assigned nurse since the emergency admission the night before. "Yes, I'm fine. But..." Elizabeth chose her words carefully before continuing. "I'd like to ask you about last night." The two entered the cafeteria facing the hospital's courtyard. Through the large windows, they could see maple trees in their autumn colors. The late November Boston sky was heavily overcast. "Could you tell me in detail about when I was brought in last night?" Christine glanced around once before speaking. "To be honest, something has been bothering me. During the emergency admission, your husband said it was an attack from a chronic condition. But there's no such record in your medical history." She lowered her voice further and continued. "And there's something concerning in the blood test results." At that moment, their conversation was interrupted by a shrill voice. "Elizabeth. So this is where you were." Turning around, there stood Martha in a flashy Chanel suit. Next to her was someone who appeared to be a hospital administrator. "Dr. Harrison, could you please expedite this patient's discharge procedures? We have family matters to discuss." Martha's voice had returned to its usual commanding tone. However, something had changed within Elizabeth during these 24 hours. "Mother, I'm staying here. And," she put force into her voice, "this might be a matter for the police." Martha's expression froze for a moment. But she quickly recovered, forcing a smile. "My dear, what are you saying? Last night was just an allergic reaction. You simply reacted to the sulfites in the wine." At that moment, a woman appeared at the cafeteria entrance. In her mid-50s, with a dignified bearing, she walked straight toward Elizabeth. "Mrs. Walker, I'm Sarah Cohen." She extended her business card. "I received a call from Judith Green, a board member of the Harvard Law School Alumni Association. Actually, I'd like to discuss your case." Martha tried to interrupt, but Sarah didn't back down an inch. "Mrs. Martha Walker, I'd like to speak with you about this matter as well. Particularly," she fixed her with a sharp gaze, "about your relationship with Attorney Stern." In the laboratory at Brigham and Women's Hospital, Elizabeth stared at the detailed blood test results. Dr. Emily Rodriguez was explaining the technical terms in layman's terms. "The drug detected in your blood is a type of benzodiazepine. Specifically," she lowered her voice, "it's a component known as a date rape drug." Sarah Cohen quickly took notes. "The dosage? More than double the normal amount. Enough to completely render someone unconscious." In the hallway, Detective Mike Donovan was taking testimony from Nurse Christine. Fragments of conversation reached Elizabeth's ears. About the circumstances during the emergency admission. Yes. Her husband was unnaturally calm. As if he had been expecting it. Sarah pulled out new documents. Elizabeth, there are also concerning points about your father, William Carter's death certificate. Though it's listed as a heart attack, actually. At that moment, the hospital room door burst open, and Emma and Michael rushed in. They were brought by Rachel Morrison, Elizabeth's childhood friend and the children's teacher. Mom! Michael clung to Elizabeth, crying. Emma stood at a slight distance, but her eyes were filled with worry. Bringing the children was my decision, Rachel explained. Emma overheard some strange conversations. Emma began speaking in a trembling voice. Yesterday, while watching TV in the other room, I heard Grandma talking to someone. They said, all the assets will be ours. Sarah carefully noted this testimony as well. Emma, you're very brave. Would you be willing to testify in court? Emma looked at her mother. Elizabeth quietly nodded. In a conference room on the top floor of Brigham and Women's Hospital, with a panoramic view of Boston, Sarah Cohen, Dr. Rodriguez, Detective Donovan, and Elizabeth sat around the table. Let's organize the evidence we have, Sarah began. First, the blood test results. Dr. Rodriguez spread out the documents. Dangerous levels of drugs were detected. This was clearly intentional administration. Next, the hospital staff testimony. Detective Donovan continued, pulling out new documents. The unnatural behavior during transport, and, he produced another document, records showing Attorney Stern told reception he had an appointment before entering the hospital. Sarah frowned. So this was all planned. And about my father's death, Elizabeth's voice trembled. Yes, Sarah chose her words carefully. Regarding William Carter's cause of death, we need a reinvestigation. Though it's listed as a sudden heart attack, there's evidence suggesting the same drug might have been used. At that moment, Elizabeth's cell phone rang. The display showed unknown. A hushed male voice spoke. Mrs. Walker, I used to work at Attorney Stern's office. I have important evidence. Records of dealings with your mother-in-law. That night, Elizabeth had left the children with the family maid, Martha Johnson. Having served the Carter family for 42 years, she was like a second mother to Elizabeth. Your father might have foreseen that a day like this would come. Martha Johnson took out an envelope from an old safe. Just before your father passed away, he entrusted this to me, saying, when Elizabeth needs it. The envelope contained a USB drive and handwritten notes. In William's meticulous handwriting were details of certain transactions. Evidence of a property embezzlement scheme planned over 5 years by Martha Walker and Attorney Stern. And this was her father's final gift to thwart it. Elizabeth quietly but firmly steeled herself for the legal battle ahead. The Norfolk County Courthouse was washed by cold December rain. As Elizabeth climbed the imposing stone steps with Sarah Cohen, she reflected on the past 3 weeks. The USB drive left by her father contained 5 years' worth of email backups between Martha Walker and Attorney Stern. There were traces of a long-term plan targeting William Carter's assets. Until the very end, her father had tried to protect his daughter. Just before the courtroom doors opened, Elizabeth turned to look at Emma and Michael sitting in the back rows. The faithful maid Martha Johnson sat beside them. Emma gave her mother a small nod. There was no more hesitation in her eyes. The clerk's voice rang out, and Judge Margaret O'Connell entered. She was a veteran who had presided over Massachusetts family law cases for over 30 years. We begin the hearing in the case of Elizabeth Carter Walker versus James Walker and Martha Walker. The first witness called was Dr. Emily Rodriguez. She began detailed testimony about the blood test results. The drug detected in the victim's blood was flunitrazepam. It's known as a date rape drug, and the dosage was 2.5 times the normal amount. This was clearly an amount intended to render someone completely unconscious. Attorney Stern stood for cross-examination. Can these symptoms be distinguished from a simple allergic reaction to wine? Yes, Dr. Rodriguez answered firmly. One look at the histamine levels in the blood makes it clear. This was not an allergic reaction. The next witness was Nurse Christine Chen. She gave a detailed account of the circumstances during the emergency admission that night. What particularly struck me was Mr. Walker's attitude. Normally, when family members are brought in for emergency care, they're in a panic. However, Mr. Walker was unnaturally calm, explaining, "It's an attack from my wife's chronic condition," as if reading from a script. Attorney Stern stood up again. Wasn't he simply trying to maintain composure as a husband? No, Christine answered with conviction. I've worked in the emergency room for 15 years. His behavior was clearly unnatural. After the lunch recess, Thomas Reynolds, Attorney Stern's former secretary, took the witness stand. With trembling hands, he produced a document. This is a contract between Mrs. Martha Walker and Mr. Stern. It promises a payment of $500,000, plus an additional 10% of the Carter family assets as a success fee. As the courtroom erupted in commotion, Attorney Stern's expression cracked for the first time. Next, Sarah Cohen submitted new evidence regarding William's death. I submit to the court the results of a re-examination of William Carter's tissue samples. The substance detected was the same drug that was administered to Elizabeth Walker. At this testimony, Martha Walker suddenly stood up. However, beside her, James maintained his hard expression. Finally, Emma was called as the last witness. The 13-year-old girl took the stand with a nervous expression. Emma, Sarah spoke gently. Could you tell us about the conversation you heard on Thanksgiving night? Emma took a deep breath and slowly began speaking. Michael and I were watching TV in another room. But I needed to use the bathroom, so I went into the hallway. That's when I heard Grandma talking to someone on the phone. What specifically did you hear? Grandma was saying, everything is going according to plan. The drug should work for sure. All the assets will be ours. Emma continued, fighting back tears. And she also said, we'll eliminate anyone who gets in our way. During this testimony, the color drained from Martha's face. Meanwhile, James suddenly stood up. Your Honor, his voice echoed through the courtroom. I have a statement to make. Judge O'Connell raised her chin. Go ahead. I confess to all charges. And, he took a deep breath, I wish to testify about the full extent of the plan orchestrated by my mother, Martha Walker, and attorney Richard Stern. As the courtroom erupted again, Martha cried out. James! What are you saying? Mother, enough, James's voice was tired. I can't tell any more lies in front of my children. Judge O'Connell fixed James with a sharp gaze. You understand your testimony will be treated as that of an accomplice? Yes, I'm prepared for that. In his subsequent testimony, James revealed everything. His enormous debts. Martha's scheme. And even the truth about William Carter's death. Elizabeth listened quietly to her husband's testimony. 13 years of marriage. 2 children. Had it all been used merely for her mother-in-law's ambitions? The rain had stopped, and winter sunlight streamed through the courtroom windows. Judge O'Connell delivered the final verdict. This court sentences defendant Martha Walker to 15 years imprisonment for attempted murder, attempted fraud, and document forgery. Defendant James Walker is sentenced to 4 years imprisonment, taking into account his voluntary testimony. Defendant Richard Stern is sentenced to 2 years imprisonment for conspiracy and permanent disbarment. After the verdict was delivered, Elizabeth went to her children. Emma and Michael rushed into their mother's arms. "Mom, is it over now?" Michael asked anxiously. "Yes, it's over." Elizabeth held her children tightly. "Now we'll start a new life." Outside the window, a dove took flight toward the sky, as if celebrating the triumph of justice. As they left the courthouse, Sarah Cohen approached Elizabeth. "There's one thing that's been on my mind," she lowered her voice. "Your father might have foreseen all of this. There's still an unopened folder on the USB drive. It's titled, 'For Elizabeth's New Life.'" Elizabeth quietly nodded. 3 months after the verdict, she had begun a new life with her children. The mansion overlooking the Charles River was a gift her father had secretly purchased, recorded in the folder titled, "For Elizabeth's New Life." "Mom, look at the tulips blooming in the garden." At Michael's voice, Elizabeth stood by the window. Colorful tulips swayed in the spring breeze. She remembered words her father had once spoken. "Flowers always bloom in spring, no matter how harsh the winter. Life is the same way." There was a knock at the study door, and Emma peeked in. "Mom, the media people are requesting interviews again." The case had shocked the entire nation. Headlines like "Family Feud Shakes Boston High Society" and "Inheritance Poisoning Plot" had dominated the news. However, what was most important to Elizabeth was that the case had prompted others who had suffered similar abuse to speak up. "We'll decline all interviews," Elizabeth answered quietly. "Except for the support organizations." She had continued her father's legacy by establishing the Carter Family Protection Fund, an organization supporting people struggling with family financial troubles and inheritance disputes. That afternoon, Sarah Cohen visited. She had become not just Elizabeth's lawyer, but a close friend. "We've received reports from the prison." Sarah shared updates about the 3 convicts. Martha Walker was serving her 15-year sentence. The former social butterfly now spent her days alone in a cell. With no visitors, her arrogance had completely crumbled. James was participating in rehabilitation programs as a model prisoner. His letters to the children always contained words of remorse. Elizabeth was still undecided about whether to give these letters to the children. Attorney Stern had been ordered to pay massive compensation in addition to his 2-year sentence. Permanently disbarred, he had been completely expelled from the legal community. "Elizabeth," Sarah carefully began. "James has requested to meet with the children." Elizabeth gazed out the window before slowly answering. "I'll respect the children's wishes. Both Emma and Michael are old enough to decide for themselves." Indeed, the children had grown remarkably strong. Emma had landed the lead role in the school play, and Michael had been chosen as captain of the baseball team. The wounds were steadily healing. In the evening, Rachel Morrison came to pick up the children. She continued to provide unwavering support. "Elizabeth, I'm thinking of taking the children horseback riding this weekend. How about we all have a picnic?" "That's a wonderful suggestion," Elizabeth smiled. That night, after putting the children to bed, Elizabeth opened the final folder her father had left. It contained a letter and detailed business plans. To my beloved daughter. By the time you read this letter, you will have already overcome great trials. The wealth I left behind is not a curse. It is a tool to help more people. I have always believed in your strength. And now, it's time to use that strength for society. The enclosed business plan is a dream I've nurtured for years, a plan to transform the pharmaceutical company into a more people-oriented enterprise. You are the only one who can make this dream a reality. With love. Father. Elizabeth quietly wiped away her tears. The full moon visible from the study window shone as gently as the moon her father had seen in his final moments. The next morning, she woke early. The morning sun reflected off the Charles River, heralding the start of a new day. She woke the children and began preparing breakfast as usual. "Mom, can I invite friends over after school today?" Emma asked. Of course. Daily life was steadily returning. But it wasn't the same daily life as before. It was a new daily life, bound by stronger, deeper family ties. The newspaper at the entrance carried an article, "Carter Family Protection Fund Implements 100 Support Case." Elizabeth was surely carrying on her father's will and returning her own experiences to society. In the autumn twilight, as dusk approached, Maggie let out a deep sigh in the driver's seat. Through the car window stood her son Oliver's special needs school. The schoolyard was silent after classes, and the yellow-tinged leaves swayed in the cold wind. Several leaves danced down, quietly accumulating on the empty slide. "Mom, let's go home," came a small voice from the passenger seat. Oliver didn't look up from his number puzzle, his fingers moving with intense concentration. His small back in the light blue sweater leaned slightly forward whenever he focused. Maggie smiled gently. "Yes, you did well today." As she started the engine, Maggie remembered her husband's face. After losing him in a sudden accident 3 years ago, she had to shoulder all responsibilities alone. At 34, as a project manager at an IT consulting firm, she juggled work and childcare daily. She woke up at 6 a.m. to get Oliver ready and drive him to his special needs school. Her days were filled with online meetings and face-to-face consultations, and in the evenings, she accompanied her son to therapy sessions. Still, supported by Oliver's innocent smile, she had somehow managed to carry on. In the back seat, Oliver counted numbers in a soft voice. His thin finger carefully traced each number written on the whiteboard. Diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, her 5-year-old son particularly loved numbers and puzzles. Though he spoke little, he could express his love to family members. That was Maggie's most precious treasure. "Oliver, would you like a snack?" When the car stopped at a red light, Maggie pulled out a small cookie from her bag. Oliver nodded silently, put down his puzzle, and reached out. There was a certain rhythm to his movements. Maggie watched each gesture with loving eyes. The car entered a quiet residential area. Her mother Dorothy's house stood in an affluent suburban neighborhood. Among the neatly lined maple trees, a large cream-colored house came into view. Her mother had started living alone there after retiring as a high school teacher. While she played the role of a seemingly calm and understanding grandmother on the surface, Maggie knew better. She recognized the strict values lurking within her mother and her inability to accept anything that wasn't normal. On weekends, Dorothy would look after Oliver. However, behind her cooperative attitude, Maggie hadn't missed the bewildered expressions at her grandson's abnormal behavior. The way she watched Oliver repeatedly arrange the same objects, her frowning at sudden loud noises, her confusion at her grandson's insistence on following set routines. Still, this time, she had no choice but to rely on her mother. "Maggie, this is an important opportunity for you," Dorothy had said on the phone yesterday. "A week-long business trip to New York. A crucial project that could lead to a promotion." With no other childcare options available, asking her mother was unavoidable. Her mother, who had initially hesitated, surprisingly agreed without resistance. "Leave it to me." Despite feeling uneasy about those words, Maggie had no alternative. Though she sensed something off about her mother's tone, she had to suppress that feeling of discomfort. And now, on the night before her trip, in Dorothy's living room, Oliver showed his grandmother an innocent smile. In the warm lighting, the little boy's smile shone brightly. "I love you, Grandma." At those pure words, Dorothy's expression became complex. The smile on her lips and something lurking in her eyes created a discordant note. Seeing this, an indescribable anxiety spread through Maggie's chest. But there was no turning back now. Tomorrow's first morning flight. Maggie hugged her son tightly and gave her mother final instructions. Oliver's preferences and habits, and emergency contacts. As she handed over detailed notes, she felt an unavoidable pain in her chest. The night wind caressed her cheeks coldly. As she left, looking back, Dorothy and Oliver stood at the entrance. In the twilight, their figures appeared fleeting, like an old photograph. Oliver waved his small hand. At that gesture, tears welled up in Maggie's eyes. On a chilly, rainy autumn evening, Maggie's car pulled up in front of Dorothy's house. She had returned a day earlier than planned. Her presentation in New York had been successful, and the final day's meeting was suddenly cancelled. Though she should have been celebrating achieving her goal of promotion, such things now seemed trivial. Walking quickly over wet fallen leaves, Maggie felt her heart pounding. For a week, there hadn't been a single phone call from her mother. Messages were met with only terse "everything's fine" responses. When she asked to hear Oliver's voice on the phone, she was always told he's sleeping. Each time, she had fought against the anxiety that gripped her chest. The sky hung dark and low, fine rain hitting her face. The maple trees swayed in the wind, casting ominous shadows on the ground. As she approached the entrance, her anxiety grew. Oliver's voice, which should have been audible by now, was missing. Her son always played the same activities at set times. At this hour, he should definitely be absorbed in puzzles in the living room. Yet there was no sound of him counting numbers or arranging puzzle pieces. Her hand trembled as she inserted the key. The sound of the lock opening echoed unnaturally loud. An unnatural silence that seemed to swallow even the sound of rain. "I'm home." Opening the entrance, she saw the living room bathed in warm lighting. Coffee aroma wafted through the air, and Dorothy was relaxing on the sofa. Dressed in an elegant tweed suit, her mother maintained a graceful posture as if waiting for guests. An open gardening magazine lay on her lap, and an expensive bone china cup sat on the table. This everyday scene made the house's abnormal silence even more striking. "Oh, Maggie. You're back early." Dorothy showed no surprise as she slowly took a sip of coffee. There was something deliberately calm about her gesture. Her perfectly styled hair, carefully selected outfit, everything was as usual about her mother's appearance. Yet within that perfection, something bordering on madness lurked. Mom, where's Oliver? Maggie's voice trembled slightly. Was there still trust in her mother remaining, or was it reluctance to acknowledge the worst? After her question, a heavy silence fell. Only the clock's ticking echoed unnaturally loud. Dorothy carefully placed her coffee cup on the saucer. The sound of cup touching saucer pierced the air like a needle. Then she looked straight at Maggie. In her eyes dwelled determination and something resembling madness. Her lipsticked lips twisted slightly. He's gone. A matter-of-fact tone. An expression showing not a fragment of emotion. The lightness as if discussing the weather. I sent that autistic garbage to a facility. Those words exploded in Maggie's mind. Blood drained from her face. Her limbs turned ice cold. She couldn't breathe. Her vision began to darken. Her body creaked as she leaned against the wall. What are you saying? Her voice was hoarse. Confusion that couldn't accept reality took over Maggie's entire body. The voice coming from her throat sounded like someone else's. It's for your own good, Maggie. Dorothy stood up and elegantly brushed back her hair. That gesture broke something inside Maggie. The pearl necklace her mother wore, a precious gift from her father. Those pearls now looked like snake scales. We have to think about our reputation. What would the neighbors think? Where is Oliver? A scream echoed throughout the room. Maggie grabbed her mother's shoulders and shook her desperately. Dorothy's perfect hairstyle crumbled, and the madness hidden in her face slowly seeped to the surface. Calm down. Dorothy maintained her composure as she brushed off Maggie's hands. The touch of those hands was ice cold. He's receiving proper treatment at a special facility. This was the best solution. If you think about him, it was the obvious choice. Treatment. Solution. Oliver isn't sick. You're the one who needs treatment. Anger and fear swirled inside Maggie. She took out her smartphone to call the police. But her trembling fingers couldn't operate the screen properly. Tears falling on the screen disrupted the touch panel's response. To have such a defective child in our family line. Dorothy's voice was cold as ice. Her eyes seemed to be looking somewhere far away. That child should receive proper treatment and become a normal child. You're too lenient. At this rate, his future will be ruined. Mom, you. Words failed her. Hot tears spilled from Maggie's eyes. Was this reality? Was this her mother? Everything felt like a nightmare. The sound of rain hitting the windows further stirred Maggie's confused heart. Tell me where the facility is. Maggie said through clenched teeth. Dorothy's expression clouded for a moment at the anger in her voice. It's useless. For his sake, visits are prohibited for a while. This is a treatment plan approved by doctors. Tell me. Maggie's scream shook the house. At that voice, Dorothy's expression crumbled for a moment. A slight crack appeared in the mask of perfection. Then, with a sigh, she began writing an address on a memo pad. Her hand showed a slight tremor as she wrote. It's pointless anyway. That facility. There was no time to listen to the end. Maggie grabbed the memo and ran towards the entrance. Her trembling hands dropped and retrieved the keys. She jumped into her car in the rain. Dorothy's figure in the rearview mirror looked somehow hollow, like a doll. Her mother's form gradually blurred behind the luxurious curtains. The torn family bonds flowed away with the autumn rain. As she started the engine, Maggie prayed desperately. In the heavy rain that obscured her vision, Maggie's car continued driving towards the suburbs. Gripping the steering wheel desperately on unfamiliar roads, guided by the address written on the memo. The sound of wipers clearing the rain echoed like heartbeats. Children's Minnesota Specialty Facility. Seeing that name, an icy lump dropped in Maggie's chest. A suspicious facility masquerading as a real children's medical institution. Could her mother have really taken Oliver to such a place? A large iron gate appeared. An old red brick building showed its intimidating form in the darkness. The seemingly well-maintained garden revealed weeds upon closer inspection. Security cameras were installed at unnatural angles, as if monitoring prisoners. "Please, I need to see my son." Her shout toward the intercom was half drowned by the rain. After a moment of silence, an impersonal female voice responded. "Visiting hours are over. I'm Margaret Stevens. Please let me see my son. Oliver Stevens." She announced her name in a trembling voice. Another silence. Then a different voice flowed from the intercom. "Mrs. Stevens, please wait." The sound of the heavy iron gate slowly opening. Its creaking sound further intensified Maggie's anxiety. A middle-aged man waited at the facility's entrance. The nameplate read, "Facility Director Mr. Thompson." He appeared to be in his mid-50s, wearing a suit under his white coat. Beside him stood a female staff member who looked to be in her 30s. Her name tag simply read, Sarah. "Mrs. Stevens, this sudden visit. My son. Where's my Oliver?" Maggie cut off his words and demanded. Mr. Thompson's expression clouded for a moment as he exchanged glances with Sarah. "Yes, we did receive him from your mother, but..." "My mother? Dorothy Wilson. She has no authority to place him here. I am my son's sole legal guardian." Maggie opened her trembling hands to her bag and pulled out her ID and custody documents. She desperately spread out the rain-dampened papers. "Please look at these. I have legal rights. My mother, she has no authority at all." Mr. Thompson reviewed the documents and again exchanged glances with Sarah. Their expressions gradually changed. "Mrs. Stevens, actually..." Sarah began speaking. Her voice carried a human warmth different from the previous administrative responses. "We thought something was odd too. The admission procedures were different from usual. Please, let me see my son." Maggie's voice was hoarse. Perhaps their hearts were moved by her desperate plea. "I'll take you to him." Mr. Thompson led the way. As they proceeded down the long corridor, Maggie heard a faint sound. Someone counting numbers in a small voice. She recognized that voice. Oliver. She ran toward the voice. She didn't even hear Mr. Thompson trying to stop her. Turning down the hallway, she stopped in front of a small room. Oliver's voice could definitely be heard through the door. Maggie grabbed the doorknob with trembling hands. Inside the room, Oliver sat alone at a small desk by the window. As usual, he was facing his number puzzle. However, his appearance was clearly exhausted. One could tell at a glance that he hadn't slept much for 3 days. "Oliver." Hearing Maggie's voice, Oliver slowly turned around. His eyes were moist with tears. "Mama." Whispering in a small voice, Oliver slowly stood up. Then he suddenly started running. Maggie knelt and embraced her son as he ran to her. His small body was trembling. Warm tears soaked Maggie's clothes. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry." Apologizing repeatedly, Maggie held her son tightly. She buried her face in Oliver's hair, deeply inhaling his scent. "Mama, let's go home," Oliver said in a thin voice. At those words, everyone in the room had tears in their eyes. "Of course. Let's go home right away." As she stood up, Maggie looked at Mr. Thompson. "I'll have the papers prepared." The facility director answered immediately and gave instructions to Sarah. Then he turned to Maggie and added, "Mrs. Stevens, this is clearly illegal. I recommend reporting this to the police and taking legal action." Sarah returned. In her hands were a disc containing security camera footage and copies of the admission documents. "These will serve as evidence. We'll also provide testimony." Maggie nodded quietly. While holding Oliver's hand tightly, she made a vow in her heart. "Mom, you will pay for this. But for now. Oliver, let's go home." Holding her son's hand, they left the facility. The rain had already stopped. Through breaks in the black clouds, faint sunset light filtered through. On their way to the parking lot, Oliver suddenly stopped. Looking back, she saw her son gazing up at the sky. "Pretty," he whispered in a small voice. A faint rainbow arched across the rain-cleared sky. Maggie embraced her son again. "Yes, it's very pretty." The emotional wounds inflicted by her mother wouldn't heal easily. However, what mattered most now was that she had protected this small life. As they got into the car, Maggie looked up at the sky. Tomorrow's battle would surely be long and difficult. But with this child. Oliver began counting numbers again in the back seat. That voice warmly resonated in Maggie's heart. In the cold autumn breeze blowing through the courthouse hallway, Maggie let out a deep sigh. Her lawyer, Patricia Miller, was making final checks on thick stacks of documents. 30 minutes until the hearing. Oliver was waiting in the waiting room with trusted staff from a support facility. "Everything is ready," Patricia quietly announced. The 45-year-old female lawyer had earned high acclaim in the field of child welfare. Upon hearing about this case, she had immediately offered her assistance. The heavy courtroom doors opened. Maggie closed her eyes for a moment and took a deep breath. Just then, she saw Dorothy's figure at the far end of the hallway. Her mother, dressed in an expensive suit with perfect makeup, was still beautiful and dignified today. However, her eyes were clearly tired. Entering the courtroom, a heavy atmosphere enveloped them both. The judge took his seat and proceedings began. Evidence was presented one after another. The facility's security camera footage. Documents showing fraudulent admission procedures. Facility staff testimony. And the record of Oliver's 3 days. Defendant, Dorothy Wilson. The judge's voice echoed. Dorothy slowly stood up. Her figure no longer showed its former dignity. "Your actions constitute a serious human rights violation. Why did you take such actions?" A moment of silence. Then, unexpected words flowed from Dorothy's mouth. "I was wrong." Her voice no longer carried its usual arrogance. It trembled. In my childhood." Dorothy stumbled over her words. Taking a deep breath, she began speaking again. "My sister was born with severe disabilities. My parents placed her in a facility and tried to hide her existence. Being normal was everything. If you weren't normal, you weren't worthy of love. The courtroom fell silent. Maggie found herself staring at her mother. She had never heard this story before. Even after becoming a teacher, I continued to demand normalcy. I demanded perfection from my students and couldn't accept differences. And then I directed the same cruelty toward my grandson. Dorothy's voice trembled. Tears rolled down her cheeks. But after placing him in the facility, I had nightmares every night. My sister's face overlapped with Oliver's. Suddenly, the courtroom doors opened. Oliver came running in. Before the staff could stop him, he was standing in front of his grandmother. "Grandma, don't cry." His innocent voice echoed through the courtroom. Dorothy looked at her grandson's face and collapsed to the floor. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Oliver timidly approached his grandmother and extended his small hand. "I love you, Grandma." Those words transformed the atmosphere in the courtroom. Dorothy embraced her grandson and broke into loud sobs. The dam holding back years of emotion burst all at once. "I'm truly, truly sorry." Maggie was speechless at the scene before her. She could feel the hatred and anger that had hardened in her heart slowly melting away. The sentence was suspended with probation. The conditions included regular counseling and compensation. Supervised visitation was permitted. As they left the courtroom, Dorothy bowed deeply before Maggie. "Maggie, I can't ask for forgiveness. But I want to change. I want to become Oliver's real grandmother." Maggie remained silent for a long time. Then, slowly, she spoke. "It will take time. But Oliver loves you." In the hallway where autumn sunlight streamed in, mother and daughter stood in silence. The road to healing had only just begun. However, a small ray of hope was definitely visible. "Hey, Mom," Oliver tugged at Maggie's sleeve. "Can we go to the park with Grandma?" After considering this innocent request for a moment, Maggie answered. "Yes. But let's all go together." The three of them left the courthouse. They began walking slowly down the tree-lined street where leaves were beginning to turn. 1 year later, golden maple trees colored the Minnesota suburbs. In the conference room of an autism support center, Dorothy quietly began speaking before newly joined families. "I committed a grave mistake. I tried to put my grandson, my beloved grandson, in a facility." Her voice no longer carried its former arrogance. After a year of psychological counseling and self-reflection, she had definitely changed. Her flashy appearance had become more modest, and humility dwelled in her expression. But that mistake opened my eyes. Autism isn't a disease to be cured. It's an important characteristic that child was born with. Various expressions showed on the faces of families seated in the venue. Young mothers carrying anxiety. Confused fathers. Bewildered grandparents. Dorothy saw her former self in each of them. How foolish I was to demand perfection. What's important is accepting and understanding things as they are. After the lecture, a mother approached her. I can't get my mother to understand. What should I?" Dorothy smiled gently. "Let's think about it together. You're not alone." From the support center's window, she could see the park. There, Maggie was watching Oliver play. Her 6-year-old son was playing in the sandbox with new friends. He carefully put sand into cups while counting. A little girl peered curiously at what he was doing. "What are you doing?" "A perfect castle needs exactly 10 scoops of sand," Oliver explained with a serious expression. The girl thought for a moment, then said, "Then I'll help." The two began scooping sand together. Watching this scene, Maggie whispered in her heart, "I never thought a day like this would come." Back at the support center, Dorothy watched this scene through the window. Tears glistened in her eyes. "Wonderful progress." A voice came from behind. Turning around, she saw Jennifer, Oliver's therapist. "Yes. But I still have so much to learn. Your transformation is giving hope to many families." Indeed, Dorothy's experience sharing at support groups had created significant resonance. Her story of confession and transformation was touching the hearts of families struggling with similar concerns. They had begun spending more time together on holidays. Today, too, they planned to visit the nearby park in the afternoon. "Grandma." Oliver waved from the sandbox. Dorothy waved back slightly. On the park bench, Maggie offered her coffee. "Mom, how was it? Today's lecture?" "Yes, it gave me a lot to think about." Mother and daughter exchanged words in the gentle autumn sunlight. The tension and wariness of the past hadn't completely disappeared. However, genuine trust had sprouted between them. "You know, Maggie," Dorothy said, gazing into the distance, "I'm looking for the facility where my sister is." Maggie looked at her mother in surprise. "I haven't seen her for over 40 years. But I've decided to stop running away." Maggie nodded quietly at those words. Something was definitely beginning to change within her mother. Oliver proudly pointed to his completed sand castle. The sight of him laughing happily with his new friend. Mother and daughter watching over him. This scene would have been unimaginable a year ago. "Hey, Mom," Oliver came running over and whispered in Maggie's ear. "Grandma's smile is really pretty." At those words, Maggie and Dorothy's eyes met. Warm tears welled up in both their eyes. As evening approached, the sky began turning crimson. Maple leaves swayed in the gentle breeze. Oliver began walking, holding both his mother's and grandmother's hands. "Next time, can we make cake at Grandma's house?" Dorothy smiled gently at that innocent suggestion. "Yes, that would be lovely. Next time, let's make a cake with Oliver's favorite numbers." Their 3 shadows stretched long behind them. They reflected the shape of a new kind of family. Wounded bonds were healing, slowly but surely. As they left the park, Oliver pointed at the sky. "Look! Clouds illuminated by the setting sun spread like wings. It's beautiful." "Yes, it really is beautiful." Mother and daughter's voices overlapped. In that moment, they felt their 3 hearts surely connected. As if a new door had opened.